Hi, my good listeners. You're welcome to Delaware Studios. This is the concluding part of the employee directory application. So to say, this is the juicy aspect of the code. We'll get to implement the update and delete of employee. And how are we going to achieve this? The employee editor will serve as the template that's going to insert and also edit a particular employee. On long click of an item, which would be the employee, ushers us to the employee editor, whereby we're going to have the employee details one more time with the help of our loader, and we'll have the ability to edit the particular details of any employee selected. Afterwards, you can save the edited aspects and have your employee edited. At the same time, we're going to implement the delete, which we're going to have the ability to delete a particular selected employee. Without much ado, let's head straight to Android Studio and let's start with the update and delete of an employee. Right there in the branch of our employee directory application, we actually stopped at the insert of an employee. We'll be moving further from there. We'll be implementing the updates and delete. In the employee activity, we need to implement the identifier for the employee data loader, which you have it as the employee loader initialized to 0. Right inside the onCreate method, we need to set on item long click listener to the employee list view. If you notice, we have a list view, which we use the custom loader to bind data to the list. And we need to set an on click listener, this time on item long click listener. So you need to exert a little pressure while clicking, so you get to have the employee editor triggered. In this method, to say, we pass in the adapter view, we override the on item click method, and we pass in the adapter view, the view itself, the position, and the ID. These are the parameters we need. And we create the new intent to go to the employee editor. Using this intent, we pass the employee activity class, and which ushers to the employee editor class. Do you know that you can use a content URI as an intent extra data? If you're not familiar with that, we'll be using that in this particular implementation. We'll pass in the URI as a put extra, which we will need to actually get that data right there in the employee editor, which we are implementing. For example, if you have the URI that points to the employee of an ID of 2, peradventure, if the employee with the ID 2 was clicked, you're going to pass in this extra data. Firstly, let's look at it. We're passing the current employee URI, which we actually created just like a variable, an object from the URI class. And we appended the ID of the content URI with its appropriate ID. Now, once you click on a particular item, the ID of the item will be appended to its URI. That's what that is. And from there, you can set the data, like set the URI on the data field of the intent, which we use the intent to set the data of the current employee URI. Now we are passing this inclusively with the intent to the employee editor. In essence, this is for the circular review where we pass the extra rectangle, and we create the rectangle outside the onCreate method and pass the button as parameter, which is the FAB, the floating action button. We launch the employee editor to display the data of the current employee. Don't forget, we have the current employee URI also passed as an intent data to the employee editor. That's where the beauty is. From here, we'll look at the employee editor, how we're able to get the intent data, and how we are going to use it in the course of the editing and also in the deleting. We also need an identifier for the employee data loader, which we declared as an existing employee loader initialized to 0, just like the way we had in the previous in the employee activity. Now we need to implement the loader manager using the loader callback and passing the cursor as a generic class here. In this aspect, you need to implement three methods, as we all know: the onCreateLoader, the onUpdate, and the onReset. Those are the three methods which we need to implement, and we have them right there. The onCreateLoader. In this onCreateLoader, we pass in, since the editor shows all employee attributes, we're going to define a projection that contains all columns from the employee table. I won't be going into details for now. I would like us to look at other aspects before we get to the loader implementation. Let's get to look at the way we call the current employee URI from its intent. Now we examine that the intent was launched from the employee activity in order to figure out if we are creating a new employee or editing an existing one. You can see two different aspects. It's either you are creating a new one once you usher to the employee editor, or you are editing a previous one. Call the intent to get the data, which is the intent being passed from the employee activity. That's on long click of an item, not on click of a floating action button. Now, for a floating action button, you're going to have to implement a new insert of employee. But on long click of an item, you're going to have to edit that particular employee with its ID attached to the content URI. I hope you get the gimmick. If the intent does not contain an employee content URI, then we know that we are creating a new employee. That's if the current employee URI is null. Definitely that's going to be a new employee you are inserting. That's how the logic is being detected. Else, otherwise, if this is an existing employee, so you're going to change the ABBA to say edit employee. The ABBA title will be changed. That's where we set the title to the edit employee, which is a string from the string XML. We initialize the loader to read the employee data from the database and display the current values in the editor. So that's how it works. The loader is going to call, since this is an existing employee with a record, the loader will call all details of the employee and load it to the edit text, so you can easily have the data back. That's how it works. Let's get to see how it's been fully achieved. Now we find all the relevant views and we need to read the user input from the edit text. You can see how we did that. I'll call its ID, and I also create untouched listener to all the input fields, so we can determine if the user has touched or modified them, so that we can be able to undo the gesture of the user, the click. This will let us know if there are unsaved changes or not. If the user tries to leave the editor without saving, we'll be able to know definitely the user didn't save anything. We'll keep the database intact without changes. But if the user click and make some changes, we'll be able to detect that. That's where the logic is. We set up the spinner. We've talked about that, and the review. We've talked about that when we set up spinner. Fine. We've talked about the save employee, how we'll be going to insert the employee to the database using the content provider. And now let's look at the onPrepare options menu. This method is called after you invalidate the options menu, so that the menu can be updated. So menu items can be hidden or made visible. This is always, if this is a new employee, we're going to hide the delete menu item. That's the top bar. That's what the onPrepare options menu is actually taking effect on. Probably if there's a new employee, you hide the delete. There's no need to delete when there's a new employee. So that's called the current employee URI. If it's null, definitely if it's new, the employee URI will be null. And we set the visibility of the menu item to false. Cool. Let's look at on action delete. Definitely, if the content URI is not false this time, the delete menu overflow displays, and you have the ability to delete a particular employee based on his content URI ID. Now we pop up the confirmation dialog for deletion. We trigger the show delete confirmation dialog method. We get to look at the content of this method, the course of the application. At the same time, we need to show a dialog that notifies the user that have unsafe changes, not that you just delete instantly. There will be a dialog. Probably the user actually didn't edit the changes properly. So the user will have another trial to actually make this work or cancel the edit. So that shows the unsafe changes dialog, just like a reminder to the user. You have unsafe changes? Are you going ahead to exit this activity, or you want to continue editing? That's what this dialog is actually going to show. We get to look at the details very soon. Let's get to look at the create loader. We need a loader to actually fetch the data based on the content URI to the edit text, so that you'll be able to edit appropriately and add if you want to add. You can delete, you can take away, or add. That's what that does. Now the create loader, since the editor shows all employee attributes, we need to define a projection that contains all columns from the employee table. That's the essence of this projection. The columns used in which you have that in the contract. And we need to return a cursor loader. This loader will execute the content provider's query method on a background thread. So it's actually going to run this on a background to fetch the details of that particular employee, this first name, last name, title, department, city, phone, email, and gender, based on the current employee URI, because that is unique to that particular employee record. You can see how the beauty is. And we're passing the projection, which is the columns that we are directing at. And we don't have a selection clause. Neither do we have a selection argument and a sort order. So we maintain those aspects to be null. Let's look at onload finished. After it might have load finished, we need to check if the cursor is null. If or there is less than one row in the cursor. Now, if the cursor is equals to null, or the cursor, once you get the count of the cursor, is less than 1, that's what we need. You return. Probably you don't move ahead. Probably it's more than 1 duplicate records. Or if it's just greater than 1, you proceed with moving to the first row of the cursor and reading data from it. This should be the only row in the cursor. Cool. The earlier is if it's less than 1. Definitely no record. That's what that means. Probably if it's null or no records. And if it's as a record, probably 1. You're going to move to the first, like iterating through the cursor. And at this point, you get the column index, just like the way we've always been iterating through cursor to get the values. Firstly, you get the index. From the index, you'll be able to extract the value. For each columns, the first name, last name, title, department, city, phone, email, and gender. Cool. Now let's extract out the value from the cursor for the given column index. Just like what I've said earlier. You get the string based on the first name column index that you've passed in an integer variable to store that. Same thing goes down to the last name column index, department, city, phone, email. Now the gender is going to be an integer, because it's either 0, 1, 2. 0 is unknown, 1 is male, 2 is female. Cool. Now let's update the views on the screen with the values from the database. Now the edit text will be populated with the text we got from the database. So you can see it's going to be the same. What you entered previously will still be intact, not that you start having different records. So you're going to have a consistent flow of data. Now this is set to the first name, to the last name, to the title, the department, city, phone, and email. So you can easily edit. That's just what. And if it's empty, you still have it empty. You can lock in a new details. Now for the gender, because gender is coming in integer, we need to test. That's why we use the switch case for the particular integer that is coming. So if it's 0, you go to unknown. If it's 1, you go to male. If it's 2, you go to female. So this case is actually going to do that for us. After the load finish, we have the loader reset. That's if the loader is invalidated, we clear out all the data from the input fields. So it's going to be empty, cleared out. So that we're going to have that cleared out, and you automatically set the spinner to 0, which is unknown. Cool. Now let's show a dialog that warns the user there are unsafe changes that will be lost if they continue leaving the editor. So this is just like a reminder, as I've said earlier, for the user. And we have this dialog, the show unsafe changes dialog, that was triggered in the somewhere here, the show unsafe changes dialog. We'll get to see what the structure of that dialog is. We create an alert dialog builder and set the message and click listeners for the positive and negative buttons in the dialog. We create the builder and we set the message, discard your changes and quit editing. The set positive is discard, and you trigger the discard button, click listener. And the second negative is keep editing. When the user click the keep editing button, so you dismiss the dialog and continue editing the employee. That's what that is going to do. So if you notice, if the dialog is not equals to null, it dismisses the dialog. So we create and show the alert dialog by using the builder create, and we show the dialog. That ends the show unsafe changes dialog. And we also have the prompt, whereby we prompt the user to confirm that they want to delete this employee. When we said you show the delete confirmation dialog. Same thing the way we show the unsafe dialog, whereby we set the message for the positive button, and for the negative, the positive will be delete. In this time, we trigger the delete employee. We'll get to look at what that method is going to do. Once we click on the delete, because for a dialog, we created this sort of dialog whereby we have the positive and negative. For the positive now is the delete, while the negative is the dismiss. You cancel, you are not deleting. Probably you mistakenly strike on the delete, so that you won't just have things done. Probably sometimes touch can be so sensitive, so you have a reminder to always prompt you in these actions. For the set negative button, which is cancel, is going to dismiss the dialog since you don't want to delete. But if you want to delete, let's get to look at the method. That's the essence, that's the CRUD. We are ended the CRUD implementation now, the delete. We're going to perform the deletion of the employee in the database. We only perform the delete if this is an existing employee, an employee with a current employee URI. That's it. We are going to check for that. If it's not equals to null, we call the content resolver to delete the employees at the given content URI. What about we passing null for the selection and selection argument, because the current employee URI is already set, which it identifies the employee that we want, because we've actually passed that from the intent on item click. We've passed it with the ID, probably the ID, an employee with ID of 5. That's the current employee URI we are targeting. Now we created an integer variable rows deleted, because we need to return the number of rows deleted once you trigger the delete from using the content provider. We are not deleting straight on the database. We get the content resolver and we trigger the delete method. You can easily look at it again. The provider, the update, if you have the delete, look at it here. The delete method, which was been triggered here, and it depends on the URI match if it's an employee. Now it's going to be an employee with ID. So this is the case that is going to run. So let's go back to our editor. We show a toast message depending on whether or not the delete was successful. If the delete is successful, we have the rows deleted should be definitely more than 0 rather, if the delete is successful. If no rows were deleted, then there was an error while deleting. So it's going to toast error with deleting. But if definitely the rows deleted is more than 1 or it's 1, the delete means the delete was done successfully, and we can display a toast employee deleted. This is straightforward, and we need to finish up the method. With this now, we can easily have the CRUD completed. We've been able to create a new employee. We've been able to read employee and populating using the list view, using the cursor loader from the cursor adapter. At the same time, we can update. Now the employee editor is doing two things. It helps us to insert new employee. At the same time, it helps us to edit. And not only that, from there you can delete a particular employee. So that deletes to, we've just covered that aspect. So this is a complete and robust way to actually implement the CRUD implementation on any application, any database driven application using SQLite, using provider. This is very simple. And this ends this particular aspect of the tutorial. And we'll be looking at the last but not the least, which is the details, because you might have been asking, we don't have a detail page. And that will actually be triggered on click listener, not the on item long click. That's where we're going to implement the details, because you might decide to have the details page that will have all details that you've actually inserted into the database. In subsequent videos, we'll get to implement pictures. Probably you need to upload pictures of an employee, and we can even implement the search using the provider. Provider has the ability to encompass all that. You can give us a good search network on our list item. Thank you very much for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial. I'll be uploading this branch. I'll be committing at this point so that you're going to have this copy. And for you, if you're new, probably you just ran into this application. It's something you can still get your hands on, but I'll implore you to go back just a few steps backwards so that you'll be able to understand where we've been coming from. And for users that said they might find it hard to continue to download codes, you don't really have to do that. Once you have the starter code, you just keep on implementing as it flows based on the branches, because we're actually continuing from where we stopped. So that's going to answer that. Thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout the session. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Love you guys, and you guys will continue to motivate me to do more. Have a blessed time. Bye bye for now.